Hello and welcome to lesson 4. Today we're going to be talking about fractions. Fraction being a part of a whole. I'll be talking a little bit about vocabulary, the parts of a fraction, how to add and subtract fractions, and I'll touch on a concept known as the lowest common denominator. We use fractions to discuss a part of a whole. I can use a circle to represent a whole, or one. I can then take this and I can cut it into two equal parts, each part being one of two, or halves. I can divide it further. Now I have 1 out of 4 parts. And we can continue to divide it into smaller and smaller pieces. Here I have 1 out of 8, and so on. When I write a fraction, there are two components to the fraction. There's the top number, which is referred to as the numerator, and the bottom number, which is the denominator. These are terms that I'll be referring to when I talk about fractions, numerators and denominators. In this instance, I have two circles, and I'm going to divide them into different parts. My circle on the left, you can see, is divided into 2 parts, while the circle on the right is divided into 4 parts. If I was to shade one part here, I would describe this as a half. And if I was to shade one part here, I would refer to that as 1 out of 4, or a quarter. If I wanted to add these two fractions together, I'm going to have difficulty in that my denominators are not the same. This one has a denominator of 2, while this one has a denominator of 4. In this instance, a simple fix would just simply turn this circle into 4 equal parts. Now, both circles are divided into 4 parts, and this fraction now becomes 2 out of 4. As you can see, I have now 2 shaded parts out of the entire 4 parts. Now that both circles have equal denominators, it's possible for me to add these together. And when I do that, if I was to put all those parts together into one circle, I would have these 2 parts plus this part. And you can see from my answer that my answer would be 3 out of 4. So going back to the original question, a half plus a quarter equals 3/4, or 3 out of 4. Pause. In my next example, I'm going to complicate things in that it won't be as easy for me to divide my circles equally. In this example, you can see I have 1 out of 3 parts shaded. And in this example, I have 1 out of 2. If I'm wanting to add these together, I'm going to have to find a common denominator that both of these fractions share. I can't just draw a line on one of these circles like my last example so that I can add the circles equally. So what I'm going to have to do is find a multiple that both 3 and 2 have in common. Often the easiest way to do this is simply multiply the 3 and the 2. By multiplying the denominators, I can find what's called an LCD, and that is a lowest common denominator. In this example, if I multiply the 3 and the 2 together, my lowest common denominator is going to be 6. In order to change the 3 into a 6, I had to multiply it by 2. Whatever I do to my denominator, I have to do equally to my numerator. So if I multiply the 3 by 2, I need to also multiply the 1 by 2, which gives me 2 out of 6. In this case, I had to multiply the denominator by 3 to get to 6, and I have to do the same to the numerator. 1 times 3 is 6. Now graphically, I can show this to you by drawing these lines here. This is what we've just done to this circle. And in this case, I took each part and made it into 3 parts. So now you can see, in fact, each circle has the same number of pieces and each piece is the same size. Now we can add the 2 together. And if I show you pictorially, I'll have 2 shaded parts here and 3 here, which is 5 out of 6. And if I show you here numerically, 2 6 plus 3 6 equals 5 6. What's very important to remember when we're adding these fractions is that we're only adding the numerators together. The denominator is not added. It stays as it is. So in this example, the 6 refers to the number of parts in these circles. It's the numerator, these numbers, the 2 and the 3, that we're bringing together as a whole. So be careful when you're doing your fractions and when you're changing your denominators and adding and subtracting them, that the denominator is not added with the other one. Pause. Okay, I'm going to give you a few questions to practice, and then at the end of the video, I will insert the solutions as well. So be sure to pause it when we get to the end of this section. Give it a go yourself, and then you can check your own work. So here we go. In the question 1, it's 1/2 plus 2/3. In question 2, one quarter plus 1/5. In all of these questions, you're going to be required to find a lowest common denominator before solving it. In question 3, 2/5 plus 3/7. Question 4, 3/8 plus 2/5. And question 5, 1/6 plus 2/3 plus 1/4. Give these questions a try. You can then check my solutions video and see how you did. So now we're going to look at the solutions for those practice questions. In question 1, I had 1/2 plus 2/3. Right now the denominators do not match. In this case, 2 times 3 is 6. I'm going to use that as my LCD. 2 times 3 is 6, so 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. Here, 2 times 2 is 4. I add the 2 together, and I'm given 7 6. This is the correct answer, but students were also taught that it's an improper fraction because the numerator is larger than the denominator. To fix this, we can divide 6 into 7. That gives me one whole group. And what's left over is 1, and I write that out of 6. So another way of balancing this is to convert it into what's considered a balanced or proper fraction. Question 2, I have 1/4 plus 1/5. In this case, my LCD is going to be 20. In the first fraction, I multiplied 4 by 5, so I'm going to multiply my numerator by 5 as well. And in the second case, I multiplied 5 by 4, so my numerator is going to be 4. I can add the two together, and my answer is 9 out of 20. I can't reduce this any further because 9 is an odd number and 20 is even, and there's no common multiple that I can divide both numbers by to make this fraction smaller. So that's the final answer. Question 3, I have 2/5 plus 3/7. In this case, my lowest common denominator will be 5 times 7, which is 35. 5 times 7 is 35. 2 times 7 is 14. Here I multiplied 7 by 5, so I'm going to multiply 3 by 5, which gives me 15. When I add the two numerators together, I'm going to get 29 out of 35. Again, I can't reduce that any further. Question 4, 3/8 plus 2/5. In this case, my lowest common denominator will be 40. 5 times 8 is 40, so here 3 times 5 is 15. And in this fraction, 5 times 8 is 40, so 2 times 8 is 16. I add the two together, I get 31 out of 40. And finally, I'll do question 5 here. I had 1/6 plus 2/3 plus 1/4. Now, in this case, I don't have to multiply all three numbers to get a lowest common denominator. I can use my math facts that I've been practicing with my multiplication table to know that all three of these are multiples of 12. So I'm going to use 12 as my LCD for this question. In the first fraction, I multiplied 6 by 2, so 1 times 2 is 2. In the second fraction, 3 times 4 is 12, 2 times 4 is 8. And in my third fraction, 4 times 3 is 12, so 1 times 3 is 3. Now I'm in the position to add them all together. Remember that your denominator does not change. It will remain as 12. 2 plus 8 is 10, plus 3 more is 13. Here I have the same problem as before. It's an unbalanced fraction with the numerator being larger than the denominator. So I'm going to divide the denominator into the numerator. I can get one group of 12 out of 13. I'll have a remainder of 1, and I write that remainder over my denominator. So the proper way of writing the answer would be 1 and 1/12. So that's a quick review of fractions that we've worked on in the past. I would encourage you to try some more questions, try some subtraction questions, try adding multiple fractions together using different denominators. Try using fractions in your everyday life. I use them very frequently with carpentry. They're also commonly used in cooking. It's a big part of day-to-day life for us, so it's an important lesson to learn. It's an important skill to have. Try cutting up apples into different fractions. There's lots of ways you can practice using fractions in a daily life. I'll be working now on the next video using fractions and decimals interchangeably. So stay tuned and we'll have a next video up for you soon. Stay safe and keep working.